my great pleasure to be here today. I was asked generously by the organizers to preside over the destiny of this session. So I would like to ask the participants to respect the time limit of 15 minutes. Let's begin now with the first speaker, Mrs. Nadia, an assistant professor in this university. Her talk is entitled The Magic of the Ordinary, Femaleness and Generic Hybridity in Alice Munro's Short Stories. 15 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. When Canadian writer Alice Munro received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2013, she was hailed as a master of the contemporary short story. She's now widely regarded as one of the world's best-living writers of short fiction in English. The present paper addresses the notion of generic hybridity in Munro's short stories and demonstrates that in undertaking such a project, the author consistently blurs the boundaries of short fiction, deliberately challenging the norms of her chosen genre and attempting, I quote, to break free from an overarching ideology of unified causalities. The short story as a genre escapes all attempts at the definition. It carries specific features that immediately imply hybridity, such as flexibility, versatility, and elusiveness. Alice Munro has a lifelong and unwavering attachment to the short story genre. She has tried many times to write a novel, but she could not. She said, I can't. She is best good only at writing short stories. She, in her fiction, she pushes the boundaries as she chooses to add depth and width to her narrative, to shift back and forward in time and space, to cross-reference to other stories, other incidents, and to other literary forms, such as the Gothic, the Romantic, realism, postmodernism, and magic realism. Relying in their elaboration and structure on generic and diegetic hybridity, Munro's stories provide the reader with a complex version of generic hybridity, since she uses one form, the short story, which usually is associated with a teleological drive toward unity and certainty. She uses this form to characterize the disturbing and unsettling Munro's woman, and to explore the complicated and ambiguous relation among the implied author, the reader, and the narrative. She even goes further as to ask the reader his or her complicity to cooperate in the composition of the story, filling out possible gaps, interpreting allusions and implications, deciphering some clues in the short story, and imagining descriptions and dialogues. Additionally, generic hybridity is developed by the juxtaposition in her fiction and in her narrative, of the modern female stories with references to Greek mythology, epic narratives, Shakespeare's plays, fantastic, even the fantastic and the supernatural elements exist side by side with the modern and postmodern words. Then her collections are hybrid in both form and content. She even subverts linguistic authority in a variety of subtle ways with her digressive narratives, her choice of the fragmentary genre of the short story, and especially in her open-ended and paradoxical use of language. Munro has written out of her own life and her own place and time. In fact, her long experience of provincial life gives her that, I quote, intense awareness of human loneliness, which, according to Howard, constitutes the essence of modern short story. Her characters try to come to terms with the world and its perceived difficulties by cherishing and yet straining against family ties, testing the limits of their world and sometimes defying their own expectations about love and life. Munro is neither realistic nor novelistic. She is the kind of romance writer who believes that our life is and will always remain essentially mysterious and ambivalent. She only if we cooperate with our inner world and inner powers of imagination, intuition, and impulse, which finally are what the romantic poets consider as the glories of the human nature. Another very characteristic feature of her work, and maybe for this one of these reasons that made her a Nobel Prize laureate at that time, and then she had the prize, her fiction displays a deceptively simple surface reality that, on closer scrutiny, reveals intricate levels of unexpected complexity about the fundamentals of the human experience: love, friendship, marriage, choice, mortality, faith, and the power of language. Because her narratives are filtered through the perception and consciousness of her protagonist, she is often described as, I quote, the historian of the working of the human imagination. Margaret's comments on her style of writing also articulate this idea that her fiction is meant, I quote, means forgetting at what is really there. She insists in an essay that she is very excited by, I quote, but what you might call the surface of life. It's just a feeling about the intensity of what really exists. Accordingly, a distinctive feature of her creative writing is that the quotidian appears as source of poetic material and a structural principle. In her narratives, ordinary life is foregrounded as the potent source of infinite signification. She said in an essay, in all the books I've loved, there's so much going on beyond or behind the proper story. There is life spreading out behind the story, and we see it out of the corner of the eye. Unquote. That's why her narratives are not continuous, but layered, a story within story, distortion of reality within distortion of reality, things within things. And this is the way her story is never linear. There's always these paths that intersect and sometimes are that conflict. This is what I call the magic of ordinariness in the title. For example, just an example from her book titled Lives of Girls and Women, published in 1971, the narrator is describing her hometown and her people. She said, and this was confirms what I said earlier, I quote, people's lives in Jubilee, Jubilee is this fictive name for her. People's lives in Jubilee as elsewhere were dull, simple, amazing, and unfathomable. Deep caves, paved with kitchen linoleum. As for her narrative structure, there is something specific and special about Alice Munro. When exploring her stories as narrative structure, critic James Castle argues that, I quote, these structures crystallize around epiphanies. But the notion of epiphany with Alice Munro is completely different from what we know about epiphany in literature, and the short fiction particularly, that it's a moment of illumination, it's a moment that would change the world, or that with her it's rather different, because the epiphanic moments are the moment of accidental clarity, to quote Watson, her critic. And it's also this moment of what is called the shock of recognition, to quote Nadia, what he said about Hawthorne. This shock of recognition is what constitutes Alice Munro's moments of epiphany. It's a moment when the character suddenly and unexpectedly and absurdly realizes, especially the women character, that her life must change at a specific moment, without taking into consideration the results, the impact of her decision, especially of her choice. And I have an example here. In a book titled Dance of the Happy, this is her first, Alice Munro's first novel, titled Dance of the Happy Shades, published in 1968. She features a for example of this uncovering of a hidden awareness that includes not only the character, but also the narrator and also the reader. Then, the major character, the central character in this novel, is talking about her experience of fear. She said, I quote, people say that they have been paralyzed by fear, but I was transfixed as if struck by lightning, and what hit me did not feel like fear, so much as recognition. This is the side that does not surprise you. The thing you have always known was there, that comes so naturally, moving delicately and contentedly, and in no hurry, as if it was made in the first place from a wish of yours, a hope of something final, terrifying. And this is the way she's talking about fear. In a moment of recognition, fear for this major character becomes a moment of recognition, becomes a hope, becomes a wish, becomes a moment of maybe exhilaration. It's a moment of something that you are waiting for, but it's something that is terrifying. In fact, most often in Marlowe's fiction, it's this precision of exactitude of emotion that counts. Such a passage communicates this idea that what is important is this, the way the writer, through her narrators and her characters, is giving precisely and exactly and minutely the way her characters feel. And of course, she said in an interview that her structure is the way feeling is elaborated, the way feeling gets from step to another, from a stage to another, which is something new and also hybrid, because she has changed everything about consideration of the way female journeys, of course, are elaborated. And she said in the same essay, her essay is ironically titled, "What is Real?" Then in this essay, she's speaking about her, let's say, her criterion or her manifesto, she said, artistic choice. She said, the capacity to capture something that is experienced in a passing moment of reflection or in sudden moments of bafflement that somehow clear the opacity of the life, wrap it up in its own familiarity. Okay. Look at this phraseology. She said, it's the opacity of life, wrap it up in its own familiarity that would reveal this artistic level and maybe mysterious level of female experience. Let me give you an example. It's from her collection of stories titled Runaway. To tell the truth, then I discovered Alice Munro in 2009 in Fripp. I found this book. I have never known her before. Then I said Runaway. Then I was attracted by the title. And then not only the title of the collection, but also the title of the short stories. There's these titles: Runaway, Chance, Soothe, Silence, Passion, Trespasses, Tricks, Powers. Then even the title of the stories are captivating to me, at least. Then I read that, of course, on the spot, the book. Then 2 days and I finished the book, and then I was mesmerized at the book because I was traveling another world. And although I'm an avid reader of women's writings, but this specific instance of reading was demarcated in my life because I discovered a new voice, not a novelist, but a short story writer by par excellence. Then, in 2013, when she got the Nobel Prize of Literature, I said, yes, of course, definitely, absolutely. I was really very happy that she had that that prestigious prize. Then, I have an example from Runaway, and it's from a short story, the first short story titled Runaway also. Then, let me skip something. The principal character in Runaway, the first person from which the collection takes its title, is Carla, a woman trapped in a relationship with a moody, rather threatening husband. Her neighbor, Mrs. James, helped her in planning her escapade to run away from her husband to another far city in Canada, because Alice Munro is Canadian, right? Which Clara thinks, I quote, is the only self-respecting thing that she could do. This is, of course, optimistic for the reader. Yet, and quite unexpectedly, Clara's plan to leave her husband fails midway as she suddenly realizes while she is sitting on the bus on her way to Toronto that she cannot lead a life without her husband, as she still defines herself entirely in terms of him. She is suddenly struck by his centrality to her existence. I quote, while she was running away from him now, Clark still kept his place in her life. But when she was finished running away, when she just went on what would she put in his place? What else? Who else could ever be so vivid a challenge? Then, of course, she said, let me off. Then she got off from the bus, called him, and said, please come and get me, please come and get me. And she went back to her life. Furthermore, another element is that Margot concerned herself with the way her characters use memory to move in time and space, forward and backward, justify their actions and reactions, etc. Then she said, Margot said, memory is the way we keep telling ourselves our stories and telling other people a different version of our stories. And underneath all this, I quote, of course, the poet, Margot, these edited, inspired, and self-serving or entertaining stories, there's, we suppose, some big, bulging, awful, mysterious entity called the truth. Passion, another story in the collection, offers an excellent example of the way her novels or her short stories use this structure and this point of view. The story begins with Grace in her 50s, revisiting a scene of crisis from her youth. Then, Grace is at that age, when she was 20 years, she ran away with her husband, with her fiancé's half-brother, and she had a wild night with him without any clear explanation or any motive or motivation. She went with him, and of course, that life or that night changed her life completely. And this is, I think, the best short story, Passion, because it's intriguing. It's full of complex and various emotions, and the narrator does not justify, does not condemn, does not blame anything. You just read and you follow the characters' haphazard, ambiguous and complex way until, of course, you achieve that conclusion, which is not a conclusion, but it's not a resolution of any kind, just the end. Because Margot doesn't believe in any conclusion. She does not end her stories at all. Then, the enigma at the core of the stories highlighted intense energy feed is Grace's inexplicable silent agreement with every single move of the stranger, the man with her. When they asked, the name of the man, he asked her, you didn't want to go home yet, did you? Without hesitation, she says no, as if she'd seen the word written in front of her on the wall, unquote. The change is accurate, violent, irreversible, and irrevocable. That this absolute change is part of the attraction that Margot had to the readers are attracted to her novel. Grace knows, I quote, that there was nothing she could do. It's not the long written Grace might say, and by the end of the story, that the writer, of course, again is revealing to the reader this ambiguous, complex way of reflecting or of feeling, rather feeling. She said, describing this passage, I'm quoting Margot, describing this passage, this change in her life later on. Grace is the name of the central character. Grace might say, she did say, that it was as if a gate had clammed shut behind her. But typical of the dream experience, there was no clang. Acquiescence simply rippled through her, and the rights of those left behind, this means her fiancé, her family, were smoothly cancelled. For Grace, and quote, Grace now has entered into an incredible world, inhabited by a mysteriously motivated fictional character, herself. She becomes fictional. She's no longer real. And everything that she was going through becomes unreal, becomes imaginative and unreal. What she had seen, that at the end of the novel, the short story, the narrator is commenting on the impact of this erotic experience on this woman. What she had seen was final, as if she was at the edge of a flat, dark body of water that stretched on and on, cold, level water. Looking out at such dark, cold, level water, and knowing it was all there was. Sorry,
They are 2 minutes, roughly 5 minutes.
Then another unexpected way of finishing. Then another expected way of finishing the story, because Alice Munro plays with the reader's expectation, the same way as she plays with the characters themselves, because the characters do not even understand their motivation and their actions and react to them. It's really disturbing and upsetting the way you expect something and the story finishes in something. Then when they finally embraced, and left, she went to the cafe or the restaurant where she works as a waitress, and he apparently went home. In the morning, she heard that Nadia, who was an alcoholic, had a mysterious accident. It was fatal as he died. Then the question, what's the point behind this ending? Then this is very important because in the morning, Nadia's family, because he was a married man, then wanted her to keep silent about that experience or that adventure. That his father came to her.
I'm really sorry this time, but you need really to wrap up the whole thing in a few seconds.
Okay, let me conclude then. I'll tell you later about what happened. Mother is not concerned with she's not concerned with impressing the reader. The depth and beauty and truth of her story she is writing, of the stories she is writing, are of greater concern. She writes of being alive, of just being human, of wondering also, of failing, of trying to understand, of trying to connect. She avoids politics, philosophy, intellectuals, or the lesson, or the controversial issues. She doesn't talk about this controversial lesson. She's deeply concerned with the human feelings, etc. Her ability to observe people incredibly closely, to render them precisely and understand them deeply, gave it her international appeal. Finally, we may join critic Michael Cunningham in his assertion that Munro, maybe more than other writers today, quote, reminds us of the scope and scale possible in a short story. She intricately dissects and charts whole lives, replete with enormous changes, with a thoroughness we might have thought only attainable in a novel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's fine with me. Let's move forward. And now the following speaker is Sahli. Her talk is entitled, I Only Wish to Know It. The powers of the hybrid subject in Jamaica Kincaid's over. So please, 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, my colleague Ayman Bouhani mentioned, forgive me. Thank you. So my colleague Ayman Bouhani mentioned the fact that Chinese people start their speeches with apologies. I would rather say that women do start their speeches with apologies, as I need to apologize for not being able to examine Jamaica Kincaid's entire fiction due to time constraints. So I will thus resort to generalizations by trying to synthesize the ideas in her novels which actually deal with the cinema issues. So a detailed copy of this presentation will be available if ever my article is selected for publication. So the phrase, I only wish to know, in the title of this paper. Sorry? How to do it?